awesome.
No, I couldn't possibly educate it.
All right. Where do you want me to be? I'll be. We'll start here. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this very bright and quite windy Friday morning here in Naarm. We here in this room are gathered, of course, on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Woiwurrung people, the unceded lands, the sovereign lands, the Wurundjeri and Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. And I would like to pay my respects to traditional owners, to future custodians, and also to acknowledge that this launch today is in many ways a beautiful connector and a reminder of the power of Indigenous making, Indigenous thinking, and the connection between those two things. The title of, we've got two publications. My name's Lisa Slade, by the way. I forgot to introduce myself. I always do that. I am the Humanities Chair in Australian Art here at the University of Melbourne. I'm deeply honoured to be providing a little introduction, welcoming everybody to the room, acknowledging that not only do we have people here in the room, but we have people joining us from all over the country and a big, perhaps all over the world. So a big welcome to everybody out there. We are launching not one, but two publications here. Two publications with incredibly evocative titles written by extraordinarily talented authors. We are today launching Transcultural Histories of Art and Artisanal Epistemologies, Knowledge to be Made. Why have one title when you can have two fabulous titles for a publication? I love that. Knowledge to be Made. And apropos my points a moment ago around the kind of acknowledgement of Indigenous epistemologies, this to me really speaks to, and I haven't read the publication yet, of course, but it speaks to or leans in or hints at the promise of a kind of redemptive new ontology that bridges to First Nations ways of thinking and ways of being. So I want to applaud the authors in that wonderful, wonderful, wonderful work. The second publication is Writing the Borderless Histories of Art, Human Exceptionalism and the Climate Crisis. The first publication is co-edited by Claire Farago, who joins us on Zoom, and Claire needs very little introduction. Claire, of course, is an esteemed scholar, the author of a publication that I know you all have and have been using since its inception in 1995, and that is, of course, Reframing the Renaissance. Claire Farago is the Professor Emerita at the University of Colorado, Boulder, and she currently lives in LA. Claire has not only co-edited the first publication, Transcultural Histories of Art and Artisanal Epistemologies, but Claire has also written the second publication, Writing Borderless Histories of Art. Can I ask you to join your hands together and congratulate them? Apologies for that, everybody. Sorry, everybody. Too loud. Okay. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
The microphone.
Okay. All right. Just in case you were not awake on this Friday morning, you now are. I would also like to welcome into our Zoom room Jens Baumgarten, who is the co-editor of the first publication. I would like to acknowledge his fine contribution and scholarship. Baumgarten is the Professor of Art History at the Federal University of Sao Paulo in Brazil. He specialises in early modern art history of Latin America and Europe, the historiography of art and contemporary visual culture. Please, a warm welcome to Jens Baumgarten. Very, very close. Very polite. Very polite. Very good. Welcome. Yes. And finally, to acknowledge and congratulate our very close friend and colleague, Susan Lowish. She gets a clap already. Get to introduce Susan as well. Susan's award-winning publication, Rethinking Australian Art Histories, has enabled us to do just that. So I'm so excited to have an opportunity to look at this latest endeavour. You have held our attention since the publication of that book. In many ways, it was kind of ahead of its time. 2018, I think, Susan, is that correct? And it has remained a constant companion. Like Claire's Reframing the Renaissance, it has reframed our sense of ourselves, and thank you very much for that contribution, and congratulations on this endeavour. I was just so delighted to even see the language selected for this publication, Transcultural Histories of Art and Artisanal Epistemologies. The word artisanal never gets enough of a look in. It's a kind of word I throw around a bit, and that in the context of my prior role, I used to describe South Australian, specifically Barossa contributions to culture as kind of an artisanal, a sense of artisanal agency. And I much prefer the word over the C word, as I like to call it. So I like that this publication has unearthed or brought to us the artisanal, and in doing that has also connected us, not just with the somatic, not just with these body-bound epistemologies, but with new ways of thinking through the artisanal to create new knowledges. So a big congrats to all of you. I'm going to get away from here right now. I'm going to hand over to Susan Lowish. I'm going to hand over to Claire Farago. And please, everybody, enjoy the conversation. I am hoping that there might be time for questions towards the end, so start thinking about that. And just to acknowledge our wonderful colleague, Mimi Kelly, who does the most extraordinary work in making these events happen. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Another round of claps, very claps, like the poets do. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa.
Pleasure. I'm taking the books with me. That's how excited I am. I'll forward your slides for you, Claire.
Okay. So we're looking at about the cover, the second slide.
Okay. Susan, do you want me to start my bit?
Yes, please.
All right. And you will forward the screens as I say forward in the old-fashioned way?
Yes, I will.
Okay, because I have no visuals of those images except what's on my laptop. Anyway, Lisa Slade, thank you so much for your wonderful and warm introduction and for the honor of being here back in Melbourne, where I spent a wonderful twice, once as the spouse of a McGeorge Fellow and once as a McGeorge Fellow myself in 2007, 2008. And that's when I first got to know Susan, and it's wonderful to reconnect with her in the course of this project. I'm going to be talking about the book that I published too, that you see there on your screen. You see the slide of just my book, Susan, is that what's up there now?
That's correct.
Okay, so let me just tell you a little bit about what this book is. I found this wonderful description that I must have written or said out loud when we were finishing the anthology. And I was just searching for a way to tell you about this book briefly because we don't have a lot of time today. So alongside the anthology that we've just published, over the past 6 years, I've written a 350-page book centered on these issues that we're discussing here today, with reference to the climate crisis and environmental degradation caused by unregulated extractive forms of transnational capitalism, a burgeoning topic in eco-criticism today. My line of argument maintains that the discourse on art became entangled with notions of human exceptionalism in the 16th century during the initial phase of economic globalization that accompanied European expansionism. Debates since the 1530s focused on how to define the humanity of indigenous people who were not mentioned in any ancient text. The issue was that if they were not fully human, they could not own property, and they could themselves be treated as property in the same way as domestic animals and used to extract gold, silver, wood, and other material resources to benefit their conquerors or invaders. On the other hand, the ability of Amerindians to be Christianized depended on their fully human, that is, their fully rational status, defined on European terms. And this tension and the relationship between art and techne, on the one hand, the broadest way that we could think about art making practices, and moral character runs through the entire European and European inflected discourse on art and political theory for the next 500 years, and it's still with us today. The classification of the arts was a significant factor in amplifying longstanding neo-Aristotelian notions of human exceptionalism and claiming that humans are not only superior to other animals in their cognitive abilities, but that entire groups of people are superior to other groups based on the assumption that it is possible to judge the mentality not only of individuals, but of entire societies by examining their shared cultural practices, their arts. The ever-expanding applications of ancient authority for classifying humans and all other animals established in the 16th century served as a major source of distinctions between biology and culture even today. Therefore, it's centrally relevant to contemporary efforts to transcend dualistic modes of thinking, such as the categorical distinction between nature and culture itself, grounded in Western metaphysics. So I think in the time we have, that's kind of it. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the book as book. And Susan, how much time do you think I have for this?
I think you have about 10 minutes, Claire. Oh,
I still do. Okay, good. So you're looking at the cover. And the cover is explained there on the side. Afterwards, after this photograph was taken in 1968, it became an iconic photograph along with the more famous blue marble. And sometime later, NASA recreated the voice recording that they had. It wasn't easy to do it, but they did it. And so if you click on that URL, maybe not right this second, but on your own time, you will be able to hear a bunch of astronauts going crazy, saying things like, get the right camera, get the right color film, it's going to go away, the Earth is rising, we're turning around, we're going to be gone. And somehow in all of that, Frank Borman and Jim Lovell and Bill Anders made this photo, and Bill Anders was the one clicking the camera. So if you go there, this is at the beginning of my book to talk about the cover, and if you go follow that link or follow what I say at the beginning of the book, you will get to pages 7 and 8 where I have a critique of all of that, and it's sort of a worm's eye view, or maybe a wormhole of the book itself. So it's kind of a trick. And I want to talk a little bit about how this book is structured in this little bit of time that I have. So there's a second, there's even I guess a third subtitle to this book, which is 5 Fugues on the Future of the Past. And here is a table of acknowledgements of these 5 fugues. And I called them fugues partly after the musical form of a fugue, in which the main theme keeps circling around until it becomes a full circle and joins all the variations on that theme. And that's kind of how this book is structured, although it became a more organized narrative as my research went along. The idea was to look at the problem from different points of view. But there's another reason that I named it fugues, and that's because the word fugue in psychiatry has another meaning of when you are completely disoriented and you don't know who you are. And the state of fugue is often caused by trauma. And I'm thinking about the trauma that we're living through in this century and the last, but really for hundreds of years, of displaced persons who are scapegoated, and that couldn't be more true than it is now. So I'm also looking at the doubleness of everything that we do. And in this book, I tried to provide a lot of hope, but we have to go through the history of these epistemological categories and assumptions, far broader than the modern discipline of art history or cultural studies even, because that discipline was formed in the 19th century after several hundred years of colonial practices. So we'll never be able to understand how those categories were formed. In reframing the Renaissance in 1995, I did a little bit of historiography, and many other people have done a lot more since then, on how the 19th century developed this idea of a world art system. And Susan has written beautifully in her award-winning book and elsewhere about it too. But the problem with this concept of world art was that it was referring initially to everything that was not European fine art. And secondly, it was driven by a model of cultural progress that actually goes back to ancient Mediterranean writings of starting with primitive culture and going to civilized culture and modern indigenous people, as you know probably better than I, but this was my thought then and remains my thought. Modern indigenous people were then slotted into the category of Europe's ancient ancestors who are primitive, and this is really a non-remediable concept. This is a concept that just doesn't work. So we've had a lot of work on that history. Monica Juneja, who is one of the endorsers of our anthology and of my book, has written a beautiful book about this very 19th century project, in which she has closely read the mostly German writers that were making these claims, very progressive at the time. So I wanted to know what happened that led up to that. And very few people have worked on that. Eric Michaud is one, and that was really quite wonderful, but don't let me digress because I only have about 5 minutes left here. I'm on the first slide. So you've been looking at the table of contents, and you can see that I stayed with this musical metaphor with short essays in between. They're kind of thematic comments on the dialogue and the main argument. And that main argument is kind of a dialogue too. Could I have the next slide? Is that up? I can just count on that, all those things being up. Okay. So I have incorporated other people's voices into this book, partly through the use of something I call text boxes. I'll show you one in a second, and partly through extended captions. And the main idea of the book is, what if we valued all forms of life? We don't need to just stick with a European understanding of who counts as creative and valuable life forms. We have a lot to learn from all those indigenous systems of belief that our European predecessors thought were primitive. So that's the basic idea of the book. And I start with this beautiful photograph of an octopus taken by a beautiful photograph of Craig Foster taken by his octopus subject, who grabbed his camera and took this picture of him, just as a way to open up the discussion. Why don't we think in much broader and creative terms about art making practices and the sentience of other people? So we know octopus sentience, insects feel and they respond to pain, they learn from experience, and they share their learned knowledge with others. Even plants with no apparent nervous system make the same chemicals like serotonin and dopamine and glutamate that serve as neurotransmitters and help create mood in animals. So the whole point of broadening the scope of what a cultural history could be about is that if it included all forms of life, imagine what that view how it could support efforts to create conditions of sustainability on the planet that we share. And so I've adopted this widely known category of the post-human or the more than human to broaden the scope of what it means to be a respected, valued form of life. What if this understanding of connectivity, my book asks, rather than human exceptionalism, were taught as part of a general education curriculum in the humanities. Could I have the next map, the next screen? So I went back to that founding idea of art history that was shared by all the human and social sciences in the 19th century, that humans and their cultural productions were directly tied to their mentality. That's really a very racial idea. And I went back to that to think about, well, how do we think about biology today? It's not based on that model anymore. It's no longer the Darwinian evolutionary model. It's a model based on DNA structure and genome structure that connects everybody. And with that, I wanted to rethink art history and its continuities with the animal kingdom and archaic humans. And what you're looking at is one hypothetical construct of how humans developed, evolved, and moved all around the world. And I don't have time to give you the exact argument, but there is a thematic essay in there about disentangling historical ideas of race from modern genetic science, and it's really quite important to do that. But then that's the basis for my thinking about identity. Could I have the next slide? Slide image. What? And now you're looking at the Australian artist who won the biggest prize at the Venice 2024 Biennale, the Golden Lion Award, Archie Moore. And I'm showing this to you. I'm sure that all of you are more familiar with this work than I am even, but I'm showing it to you in the context of the text boxes. So to break up the linear narrative of my book, I also included these short essays and other people's voices. And I'm hoping that you can read that screen that I don't see, but we'll just hope that that's the case. In which I am quoting Archie Moore's curator, but also Charles Green, who has written a book about transcultural art histories. And I knew Charles from the time I was there in Melbourne, and think very fondly of my experiences with Charles and his partner, Linda Brown and Green. So that's one example. And then later in this book, so there are these 5 chapters, and the last one is trying to think about what would a history of human culture and animal culture, everybody's culture on a planetary scale, what would that be like without this primitive to civilized narrative that is implicit in so many different things? So could I have the next image? And I'm going to ask Susan to talk about this, and she supplied this great image. But instead of starting with the French and Spanish cave paintings that are all of our art history books that are in the Western mode use, I thought about how about if we have a relational history of evidence of early creativity and art making practices. And in fact, the caves that are in Europe are not nearly as old as the continuous tradition of visual art making practices that survives in Australia, and even the oldest one that has recently been discovered in Indonesia. So Susan, can I ask you to say a couple of words about this image?
Oh, it's no big thing. So this is on Jawan country, so I respectfully acknowledge that this is in the direct lineage of Jawan people, and it was a great privilege of mine to spend a day there, lying on the ground, looking up at this incredible ceiling with the provision of the late Margaret Catherine, who has custodianship over this site, which is in the centre of Arnhem Land. All I want to say in concert with what you've been saying, Claire, is if you look closely at this image, you'll see the ripples, a kind of a rippled surface, and that is the marks left by the waves of the sea 28,000 years ago. So just to connect the ocean to this central Arnhem Land plateau, visually, it does it for us. That's all.
Thank you. That's absolutely perfect for the time we have here. And I was so privileged to be able to draw on Susan's expertise as I was writing this book and we were working on an anthology. So could I have the next screen? Another example drawing on Australian connections. So when I was in Australia, I was fortunate to meet Jen Green and become friends with her, and her excellent work on trying to think linguistically and visually about multimodal forms of storytelling as a way out of other culturally Eurocentric ways of thinking about art. And so what you're looking at on the screen now on the left is another one of the text boxes. I don't know if I need to read any of that to you. Do you think I should read that out loud or just leave it on the screen and keep going?
I think keep going.
Okay, so let me just point out one little thing. The text box on the left is what appears in the book. The write-up on the right is the longer version that I sent Susan by mistake of what the text box looked like before I had to cut it back, because throughout this whole process of working with Routledge, I was very conscious of going over the word limit. And they gave me about an extra 20,000 words, so that they're really nice, but this went on absolutely throughout the whole book, especially for the text boxes at the end, when they finally gave up and just let me just have a few thousand extra words so they could get it into production. But the two versions are the same thing. Could I have the next one? So you're looking at two Egyptian blue glass beads, is that right? Well, so I used I also made friends from giving a talk in Helsinki with a group of scientists who work on Neolithic burial mounds in Denmark. And I went to Denmark and met a team of people, and I'm very indebted to them, but I'm just showing you now very briefly one of their most spectacular finds that has been published, and that is they found in a 1250 BCE burial in Denmark of a young woman. And they found these now in a bunch of burials there of Egyptian blue glass beads. And they have since traced it, I believe, to the workshop of Tutankhamun. So these were highly valued, obviously. We don't know what they meant, but it also speaks of trade. So these Danish archaeologists are working on the world system of trade that existed far prior to the Roman Empire. So it's another way of decentering Europe and thinking about cultural practices in much broader networks than any modern discipline or any modern regional specialization could come up with. And could I have the next one? And
Yes.
now you're looking at a little Buddha. And this is just like it. So I'm just taking little snippets from the book. But this is a Buddha. We think it came from Kashmir on the in India-Pakistani border now. And it was recovered from a 6th century ship burial in an island in Sweden, what is now Sweden. And I compared it to an enamel image of a seated figure from a 9th, 10th century ship burial with cloisonné enamel. And we know that the portage and transfer of information between the Mediterranean and the northern part of Europe was going on for a very long time. But this is just a beautiful thing that it was recovered from a ship burial. Could I have the next one? And this is how the book ends. So throughout the book, it's up to us to decide, are we going to sustain the planet and continue, or are we going to go down in flames? Because that's kind of where we're headed right now. So this is the final final image of the book of the point of no return. So I had talked earlier in the book about the slave trade and how people who were enslaved, how complex that was, and they thought that they were going to the afterlife because the white Portuguese slave traders who came first looked like the images of the afterlife to those black-skinned people, those white-skinned semiotic opposites of them, but instead there was no such thing. So this is one of several memorials. This one's at Cuida in Benin, which was a major slave port for Portuguese, French, English, British, and it was run through intermediaries. So it's very complex, and everybody's complicit in all things. But I love this image because it shows a Black couple coming back from the point of no return, and this beautiful archway commemorating the fact that they did return and we do have a future. So that's it for my little book presentation. And this all goes parallel with what we were doing for the last 5 years or so with Susan and Jens that came out of a conference. Should I keep going or should I? Yes, next one. All right, next one very quickly. So the project, the main project that we're here for today is the anthology that's just been published. And this started as a proposal that I made based on this book that I just talked about to the Congress of the International History of Art in 2018. And I was lucky it was accepted. And it was meant to open up the discourse even more by asking other people for their ideas of how they would think about transcultural ways of thinking about cultural production. And so it took a few extra years because of the pandemic. And in the end, we still had a hybrid conference. And I think only one person besides Jens who was on board because he was my Brazilian co-chair. And everybody was zooming in this hybrid event. But it was really a wonderful event. And afterwards, we wanted to continue the project, or some people did. And that's what you're looking at now, the initial call for papers. Could I see the next slide and this or image? And this is the this is from the conference proceedings that were published. And now one more, and we can really get to the heart of what we did. So in our call for papers, we didn't tell anyone what we thought artisanal epistemology was. We didn't even tell anyone what we thought transcultural art history was. We wanted to hear from others, and we got an amazing array of papers that we then organized in terms of different methodologies. And then during the time that we were waiting for the pandemic to go away, that never did, we had a virtual workshop and read the work of Tim Ingold on creativity, so that we spoke about, well, was creativity a universal concept? How many times have I seen in transcultural and other kinds of cross-cultural projects that creativity is assumed to be something that is beyond discussion. But of course, it's just a discursive category like art, like anything else. So we asked that question of people with a wide range of expertise, and then that became an organizing principle for a book of very, very different kinds of case studies that we paired, not to have binomial pairs, but to look at connectivities across different case studies, subject matter, methodologically, primarily. And now the next slide. Jens prepared this. I'm going to just turn this over to Jens. Jens.
Yeah, this is thank you so much, Claire and Susan. So it was a wonderful time, and I really want to start with this because this is what I thought, how can we present this, which is an open project. This is very important, I think, to mention. We had at the beginning no close idea. We wanted to listen, but at the end we are still in this way. So even that it looks like there are people from different countries, from different continents, it doesn't mean to have this complete art history or complete anthropology. It means it is in its own way also entangled. So these connectivities are for us entangled, and also it has to do with those. I tried just to make this chart just to help me to understand our different levels of thinking. So I love to think that this is the intellectual work, to stand in front of very complex, different transfers and evolutions and whatever, and is not to put it in a frame, but on the other hand to deframe it, so to let it open. And so I tried to join some I have to see because this is the outcome of all of our discussion. And if you read the coda, at the end of the book, it shows exactly, it seems to be a very whole, very empty word or rhetoric to say, yes, this is not the end, but we are continuing to do it. So it seems to be, okay, everybody says that and we don't care. But in our case, it is exactly that. So, and not to get me to get lost. So it is not what came out. It is just to map in a certain moment, in a certain place, me in Sao Paulo, Claire in Los Angeles, Susan in Melbourne, and all these different diachronic, anachronic, and different localities placed here together. And so the concepts of artisanal epistemology, colonial entanglement, hybrid labor, transcultural historiography, and language and translation are just the way to have concepts which are only working concepts. It is exactly that we said. Creativity is not given. It is a construction in itself. So we are losing this this grab, but is so clear, and it's getting fluid. And then what can we identify as function, and what implications does this have? I don't want to read everything because you can see it. And for us, that is the way to also to discuss artisanal epistemologies. It is also to discuss what is artisanal, what is epistemology for all of us. So we three, and we discussed it, and sometimes we are very now angry in the way that, no, this is not what I want to say. And but we always brought it to another level and developed, I love the word interpretement, which I haven't used here and not in my chapter, but the interpretement in the way that we have different analyses that are in connection, in relative connection. And this is what was the last sentence of my small presentation, which is better. We now come to after Susan, and then to come a little bit discussion that it's not exactly, it's not provincializing Europe, but it's to put the entanglement in the center. So the entanglement and the transformation, the artisanal epistemology, this is in the center, and this can't be not. This must be a very evolutionary. No, evolution is horrible. It must be always in moving. And these different moves, these different relations that we have in every move, this is what the book, the anthology, should show, but therefore not as each chapter is not a closing one, but each chapter is offering an introduction to rethink. And so this is an anthology of rethinking and collecting, and to see this in a more complex way. So this is, and oh, one word also, and then we discussed it because it is so important, and always I want to say it when I am, and I love to be in Melbourne, was the starting point also to think about transculturality coming from Brazil. So Melbourne has a very important meaning for me, but it started also to think about, okay, but we always speak English. So English is not my mother tongue, and I try to give my best efforts, but I know it's still a crappy English sometimes, and I hope it's not too scrappy. But this shows me the thinking of these complexes in English or in Portuguese or in German, these are very different concepts. And we have to bring this also into the discussion, because languages are not neutral and they have their implicit categories and concepts. And so, no, I stop. Sorry.
Thank you, Jens. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. Well done. We had such a good time talking together. And what Jens just said reminds me of a conversation that Jens led about the word thing itself and its many meanings in German. And I know Ruth Phillips, a Native Americanist whom I admire highly, prefers the word belongings, which is one of the words that Sachen means. So yeah, we had many wonderful multilingual puns and exchanges on how to change the structure of art history. Susan, do you want to take over for a while so that we hear from you?
No, what I can say is just to everybody in the room, thank you for coming, and for all of you Zoomers. But can I just say the power of Zoom? Claire and Jens and I met we had like maybe an hour, sometimes 2 hours a fortnight, where we would just close off the rest of the world and talk with each other. It was the most generative and exciting and, yeah, enjoyable process for collaborating. So I just want to really, in a heartfelt way, thank you both for your generosity and sharing. We should probably talk a little bit about the book. If I can say just one thing about Knowledge to be Made, which we really wanted to be the main title, and then the subtitle was this, but our lovely book publishers said no. So we compromised and put the both on the front, which was maybe, but Knowledge to be Made. I mean, my knowledge of for this book was made through experience. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to write my chapter without the generosity and sharing of Mr. Wanambi, who insisted on coming to Melbourne every year and sharing with the students. And I just wanted to also emphasise the importance of actually getting out there and experiencing to generate knowledge, and to encourage us all to protect our precious research time, which is when we get to do that, and our research resources, because it feels globally that that's under threat. And yeah, I don't want to advocate for action or armies or anything like that, but yeah, actively protect how we know, because that's, for me, the most important thing. And now back to you guys, because we've got to share what the chapters of the books are, and we've got to also leave some time for bringing others into this conversation.
So Jens, do you want to do that, or I can do that pretty quickly, and Susan can correct me what the chapters are? Because we don't have time to really talk about them very much, but I can just sort of introduce them to you. They're on the screen. So
Yeah,
the first,
you can start.
yeah.
Perhaps Claire, you can start.
Okay, so the first section, new epistem. So these are relatively arbitrary, because we had 34 submissions, of which we could only take 14, and then 11 people wanted to continue to the book, and a few people dropped out that I'm sorry they had to leave or they didn't have time. And then we gained one more person from Brazil, who is Jens's colleague. And we kept basically the structure that we had in the CIHA conference, because it worked so very well. So new epistemologies in formation. We paired Bart Pusha working with Inuit printmakers who were also starved by the Danish government and considered dirty at the same time that they were forced to change from their clean moss heating in the winter to coal. And that made everything dirty. So he looked at creativity from the standpoint of how the engraving was a part of their spiritual system, at the same time that he looked at the colonial construction of the othering of these wonderful artists adopting new techniques. Peter Krieger who was supposed to be here, but I don't see him on the chat, a wonderful major player for the SIHA Central Steering Committee, along with Jens. He worked with an artist who was raised, I think he was raised in the urban poor villages that are like the what are they called in Brazil, Jens?
Favelas. Favelas.
Favela.
Yes, and so this artist was making art there using these found materials, but then also importing them into the gallery space and creating new ways of thinking about the conceptual impact of environmental destruction and change on the people in the favelas, but also much more broadly, the environmental destruction, and then making new art out of that, and that epistemological change. So that ties the first two, first section of 2 chapters together. Could I have the next one? I'm gonna have to go much faster than that. So transcultural institutions, I'm gonna turn this over to Jens in just a second. So Patricia Zalamea, who was part of the original thinking about the submission to SIHA in the first place. So she's been working for a long time on the construction of academic art in Colombia. And she took this one artist who was a very innovative printmaker, using photographs and other things, and how he made the European academic system quite different in a time of great administrative change in Colombia. I don't have time to do much more than that. Jens, I'm going to turn it over back to you, of course, for your own chapter.
Sure, for my own. So I was working together with my colleague and very good friend about the curatorial practices and the discourses that are entangled again. So it is this question how indigenous art is not well received within Brazil, but then some artists like Oiticica and others go outside with a certain group of curators, then it is well seen, and then it's coming back to Brazil, and then it's a very important art production from Brazil. So that is a little bit in the first quote here, "Para o inglês ver, para o brasileiro acreditar." So it means for the Englishman, look, it means it was the 19th century. It actually means we are doing like we work, but when the Englishman is away, we stop working. And so it's on the opposite. It is to convince the Brazilian for a certain kind of art that is exactly also very critical, and also again the dictatorship, but they are transcultural discourses, and we wanted to show this very complex entanglement of indigenous art production and also market and in Brazil today, and the art market as it works as an overlying concept, and then the market that is also very important.
Could I have the next one? And for some reason, the whole PowerPoint is now working on my screen. I don't know what happened, but it's great to see it. So the next section, thank you, Jens, that was great. And part of what Jens was saying in his chapter was that that the indigenous art was partly appropriated and made to seem like it was different when the power structure was still maintaining all the control. I hope we have some time to talk about what's going on right now in Brazil. That's better than that, but that's it. So then the next section, material flows, circulating objects, and we had case studies where there wasn't any literary record, and in some cases there was, but it wasn't very direct. So Jeanette Favreau-Peterson has been working on the Florentine Codex forever, and she supplied a really fantastic chapter about how the indigenous artisans or artists who were tlaquilos, and they were highly placed nobles in society, were importing their own worldview into this Florentine Codex, because they were the ones that were making it together with the overseeing missionaries that were preparing an ethnography to ship back to the King of Spain. It never really got there, and it almost got destroyed in the process, but luckily we have it. And the original Florentine Codex is in a Medici library in Florence. So that was an amazing chapter for us. And then Erin Benet has been working, and she's published a beautiful book on this as well, but she's been working on stone carving and Christian identity for us, looking at Hindu makers of Christian monuments in India, where there was St. Thomas ended his life career as travels in India, so that there was a Thomas Christianity long before the Jesuits and other Westerners showed up. And so that's a really nice complex project of how to extricate the indigenous voice and the complexity of Christianity that is Indian. And so she also had no written documents to work with, but using her skills as an art historian. Lee Clark was looking at the agency of aromatics and also the containers in which they were circulating, and looking at the complexity of the materials that were circulating and coming from all different places. And you can't just, there's the entanglement full force when it comes to the material circulation of things and the ideas that go with them. Could I have the next one? Next slide. And so our last section was, our last section, the one in which Susan was the closing chapter of the whole book. We had a team of people who were originally presenting this at a seminar at the Kunsthistorisches Institute in Florence and developed their own project. They were looking at rethinking the way that we think about dome architecture in the Mediterranean and the Western creativity and progress model. Brunelleschi came up with this double domed architecture, but they looked at it inception and technology and the transfer again of oral culture to see that it was really a technology that was developed elsewhere in the Mediterranean. And Lorenzo is partially in Iran right now. So it was a really very complex project, and they did a beautiful job because they looked at the early historiography where Paolo Sao Palese was a conservator, I think, an architectural historian, and he set this up looking at 19th century documents, and they incorporated that whole thing. And now I'm going to turn it back to Susan to talk about her absolutely wonderful chapter.
Thank you, Claire. So yes, so this is basically what I said before about Mr. Wanabe coming to Melbourne and sharing, and me needing to honour him after his unexpected and all too soon passing in 2022. I just might make a shout out to his daughter, who actually came to Melbourne this week. He was actually leaving on a flight at 12 noon today, so the timing was terrible, but at least we got to see her continue in his legacy and his footsteps by giving away at Acme on Tuesday night. That's all I want to say about that. I'm moving to the next slide. Oh, maybe get the book, read the chapter. Arctic Amazon. Does anyone want to speak to that influence, or will we go straight to the coda? We've got about
go straight to the coda. We were very, very much influenced by a book that Susan brought to our attention, and I've since then, and you probably know him too, Gerald McMaster. I've since then gotten in touch with Gerald McMaster, who is contributing to another project that is the continuation of this anthology of looking at art history and the climate change and environmental destruction. That wonderful person. Anyway, back to you, Susan.
Okay, so coda, that's where we wrote up one of I don't know how many conversations we had as a way of kind of showing our methodology and our excitement for ideas. And it's a very much a lively conversation. We didn't massage the text very much, so it's got a life to it that I particularly love. So if that's a way of working that we can use into the future, then let's do it, because it enables us to connect in ways that are more immediate and also more revealing about our commonalities across the globe. So that's all I really want to say about the coda. Can I just speak about this image?
Yes.
So Megan Coke very generously gave us permission, gave us the images to use on the front cover and also in the coda. And as a way of giving back, I volunteered to help her build another iteration of this. So if you see me with mud-stained clothes, that will be the reason why. And so I'm hoping to rope in as many volunteers who would like to spend some time on the north of Stradbroke Island, recreating these incredible oyster reefs that were only destroyed through the process of colonisation. So let's find a real way to give back. That's all.
So the drift of this anthology was from the European construct of artisanal epistemology that was introduced by historians of science to focus on the early days of the scientific revolution, a concept that is also very Eurocentric and maybe out of date, of how important technologies of making were for high science. And this has been broadly developed and adopted by some art historians and others as well. But the other part of it is that we looked at it transculturally, and how to look at it transculturally meant that in the course of this anthology, if you read it, we start with this European framework, and I've written a rather detailed history of both transculturation theory and artisanal epistemology as a theoretical introduction. But by the end of the book, it's really about indigenous ways of making a sustainable planet, and how we're all thinking together. And why is it so important for art history to recognize indigenous voices and change the structures of art history, get out of the museum, out of the classroom, and into the world with what it is that we do. Because art is such a wonderful way to think positively about our place in this planet and the future. Thank you. So, yeah, that's
Hearing.
great. So is there time for questions or comments?
Yeah, why not? Let's do it. If people need to leave, they'll leave, but if they'd like to stay and chat, then yes.
Okay. So are there comments in the chat? Oh, Peter is here now. He did join. Hi, Peter.
Just come up to the front so you closer to the microphone.
So I have, hello, thank you for the nice talk about this wonderful book. And I was in the CCAR conference, I was in another panel. So that's why I'm also interested in the talk about this artisanal knowledge. And one thing I was thinking about is like the artisans, I mean, both contemporary and in the past, they are working for a kind of market or a patron. So I noticed one of the paper was talking about the market. So I want to know more about when you're organizing this book and the panel. What do you think about like how much the market or the patron influence the artisans, and when they are producing these objects, when they are producing the making in the process, how much this was affected by the external elements? Thank you.
Did you guys hear that question? It's fantastic.
Would you like to address it, Susan? Because I could hear every other word.
Okay, so the impact of the art market on the concept of artisanal epistemology. It's funny, I've been dealing with this same issue in the 30 subject, and this week we were talking about that in relation to the recent, well, 2023 APY lands incident, if I can call it that. I just think of the art market like a, can you have a pet snake that you have to kind of wrestle with, and that you're not sure if it's going to bite you and kill you, but it might be a lot of fun if you can actually, because it's kind of exciting and generative. So does that makes that doesn't make any sense at all. But what I'm trying to say is that it's kind of a dangerous necessity. I mean, we know that the market is a driver and that artists and artisans won't and don't survive unless they engage with it. But it also reminds me of the story that Jens told us during our conversations about an artist who felt so much pressure from his success that he took his own life. So it is a dangerous play, but a dangerous and necessary play.
Let me, can I add just a little bit to that now that I hear the question better? We talked about artisanal epistemology in the context of Indigenous First Nation artists and others who want to be accepted into the category art. So this artisanal epistemology, which sounds like maybe it just replaces craft, which is what Lisa was saying at the beginning too, the C word. But we're thinking about it much more broadly. It's not in opposition to scientific knowledge. It's not in opposition to art. It's something broad enough that can have lots of different infrastructure. It admits of everything. But to what extent it is accepted by people that are not wishing to be absorbed into the hierarchical art industry system, that's an open question. And I hope, that would be worth talking about at some greater length. It was one of the questions that the three of us formulated that we wanted to take up before we realized that an hour is not as long as it could be. But great question, great concerns.
Speaking of,
I can
sorry,
just to add to show in like really 2 sentences. This is very interesting in Brazil because it's on the one hand what I wanted to show is so indigenous people, artists are sent to like Venice to the biennial, and they're integrated in one of the main museums on the one hand. On the other hand, also there are very tragic moments that an amazing person, he committed suicide because he was feeling he can't get out of this trap. So he is in this market trap, and he is used for something, and it was not possible for him to come out of that. And so these are those and those curators are also not everybody related to the art market, but on the other hand, you have like a favela museum, which is also a mixture of descendants of indigenous and they nowadays it's a contemporary, very small museum within the favela. So this is also something that is coming from. I just heard it was the grassroots moving. So I think that is very interesting. It's not just it's all lost, but on the other hand, it's on the other way. It's really growing up also, very different thing. And it would be amazing, to look again with Australia and other countries, what is going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would be a fascinating discussion as we see the emergence and the funding of community museums across Indigenous lands. So you were saying an hour is not long enough? We've had our hour. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. I'd like to thank Lisa for introducing us. I'd like to thank Mimi for doing all the work behind the scenes. And I'd especially like to thank all of you, especially my co-editors. It's been a blast. I can't wait for the next iteration. Bye.
Thank you. Can I add one thing? That even if you don't buy the book, the coda and the introduction are open source, so you can just download them for free.
Right. And I'm working on an ice cream.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the book, I've got ready. So